The woman did not knock. She had no strength left to knock. She simply stood at the iron of the winter gate with one child pressed to each side of her, and she said, in a voice that the wind almost stole before it reached me, "Please, not for me, for them." I have thought about that voice for 40 years. I was a young man then, a clerk to a grain merchant, hurrying along the Caroldyke wall with my collar up and my ledgers under my arm, and I had no reason to stop. The whole country had no reason to stop. It was the third winter of the Long War, the winter they later called the Iron Winter, when the snow came in October and did not leave the ground until April, when bread was weighed out by the half-ounce, and a man learned not to look too long at his neighbor's hands for fear of what hunger had done to them. I stopped because she said it twice. The first time to the gate. The second time when the gate did not answer to the snow. I will tell you what I saw, because the men who could tell it better are gone, and because a thing like this should not vanish just because no clerk thought to write it down. The winter gate was the small northern gate of the old palace at Helsmore, not the great lion gate where the carriages came, but the servants' arch on the Caroldyke side, where the wall ran black with ice, and the lamps were not lit until full dark to save the oil. One man stood his post there. He stood it the way they were trained to stand it in those years, which is to say like a thing carved rather than a thing born. Gray greatcoat stiff with frost across the shoulders, the tall fur cap whitened along its crown, the long rifle grounded at his right boot, the bayonet sheathed, his breath the only proof he was alive, and even his breath was disciplined, slow and even, a thin gray thread that the cold tore away. I knew the kind of man he was, without knowing his name. We all did in Helsmore. The Wintergate sentries were not allowed to speak on post. They were not allowed to leave the arch. They were not allowed to lower the rifle, to sit, to lean, to take food, to so much as turn the head from the fixed line of the eyes. The whole meaning of them was that they did not move while everything around them moved, the war, the snow, the dying. A child could pull at a sentry's coat and he would not look down. That was the discipline the king's house asked of them, and that winter it asked a great deal more besides. So the woman stood, and the sentry did not move, and I stopped on the far side of the lane where the wall gave a little shelter, because I am ashamed to say I wanted to see what would happen, and I did not yet want to be part of it. She was not old. The cold had aged her the way it aged everyone, cracked lips, a gray cast to the skin, eyes sunk back into shadow, but the hands that held her children were a young woman's hands, and the black of her coat was the black of mourning worn past mourning, the dye gone rusty, the cuffs eaten thin, a war widow. There was no mistaking it. That winter the city was full of them, women who had been given a folded flag in autumn and a final ration book in the same week, as though the house could feed a memory. The two little ones I will not describe closely, because they were small and frightened, and they have a right to their own dignity even now. I will say only that the boy was perhaps 7, and held himself like a soldier because he had decided someone in the family had to, and the girl was younger and had stopped crying, which in that cold was worse than crying. They wore everything they owned. You could tell because none of it fit and all of it was thin. "Please," the widow said again to the gate, to the man inside the gate, to the snow. "I am not begging for coin. I would not shame your house at its own door. Only there is a kitchen. I have heard there is a kitchen. My children have not eaten since the day before yesterday, and I cannot." Her voice did not break. That is the part I remember. It bent and would not break the way green wood bends. I cannot make the cold stop coming into them. That is all. I cannot make it stop. The sentry did not move. I want you to understand that this was not cruelty. I thought it was. In that moment I felt the old hot disgust rise in me, the easy contempt of a young man for a uniform, but I was wrong, and I knew I was wrong before the hour was out. The man could not answer her. He was forbidden the smallest thing. If he stepped from the arch, the post stood empty, and a sentry who left his post in wartime was not lectured. He was tried. If he spoke, he broke the silence that was the whole of his orders. If he so much as looked down at the children, the officer of the watch, And there was always an officer of the watch, somewhere behind those black windows, could have him off the wall and into the cells by nightfall. He had a code pressed down on him heavier than the snow on his shoulders, and the code said, "You do not move." And yet, I saw his eyes change. I was close enough, and the lamp above the arch had just been lit against the early dark, and I saw the eyes change. They did not turn, he did not turn, but something behind them came awake and went very still in a different way, the stillness of a man who has just made a decision he is not allowed to make and is now working out how to make it anyway. I have seen that look since, on better men than me, in worse places. It is the look of a man counting a cost and finding it acceptable. He did not leave the arch, he did not speak to her, he did not look down. What he did was lift his rifle. Not at her, God forbid, never at her. And I will tell you plainly, there was never one instant when that long barrel came anywhere near those children. And any man who tells the story otherwise is telling it for the wrong reasons. He brought the rifle up to the present, the formal salute of the post, the movement a sentry makes only for the passing of the king's own carriage or the colors of a regiment. He brought it up slow and square and perfect, and he held it there in the falling snow, at the small servant's gate, before a starving widow and her 2 children who were nobody at all. I did not understand it. The widow did not understand it. She flinched back a half step, gathering the children, certain she had given some offense. The boy looked up with the white face of someone bracing for the worst. And then from the dark behind the black windows of the gatehouse, a single bell rang twice. I know now what that meant. I did not then. I only knew that the sentry, having rung something I could not see, came back down to the ground with his rifle, resumed the grounded position, fixed his eyes once more upon the empty middle distance, and that a smaller door, a wicket cut into the great iron, scraped open from the inside. A man's voice came out of the warm dark beyond it, not the sentry's, an older voice, low and quick. "Madam," it said, "bring the little ones in out of the cold. The sergeant of the winter gate has signaled for you. You are expected." She was not expected. No one in that whole frozen city was expecting her, but the man at the gate had found a way to make it true. I should have gone on. My merchant was waiting on his figures, and the light was failing, and a wise man in the iron winter did not loiter at the doors of the grate. But I found I could not move my own feet, and so when the older man in the wicket caught sight of me standing across the lane, he looked me up and down once, quick as a butcher judging a carcass, and said, Are you with her?" I am not a brave man, I have never claimed to be, but there is a particular shame in being asked a question like that across a lane in front of a starving woman, and I heard myself say, "Yes," before I had decided anything at all. It was the truest lie I ever told. From that moment on I was with her, and have been, in a manner of speaking, ever since. "Then come and be useful," the old man said. "Mind the step, it's iced." His name was Crane. He was the under-steward of the lower kitchens, a narrow gray man of 60 with a back like a question mark and hands scalded shiny from 40 years of taking trays out of ovens too quickly. He held the wicket while we passed through, first the boy, who would not go before his mother and had to be coaxed, then the little girl, carried, then the widow, who stopped on the threshold and looked back over her shoulder at the sentry in the arch. He had not moved. Of course he had not moved. He stood in the snow exactly as before, eyes forward, rifle grounded, the new lamplight gilding the frost on his cap, and you would not have known, to look at him, that he had done anything at all. That was the thing about it. That was the thing I have never been able to explain to people who were not there. He gave her the most he had to give, and he arranged it so that it could never be traced to him, and then he stood there as if it had cost him nothing, when I had seen his eyes, and I knew exactly what it had cost. "Thank you," she said to him. He did not answer, he could not. But the boy, the soldierly boy of 7, drew himself up on the ice step, small and shaking, and brought his bare red hand up to his brow in the clumsiest, most serious salute I have ever witnessed, returning the only honor the sentry had given them. And I will tell you that the sentry's eyes came down, just once, just to the boy. For the space of a single breath, against every order he had ever been given, the carved man looked at the child and the child looked at the man, and something passed between them that I have spent my life trying to deserve. Then Crane shut the wicket, and the cold and the lane and the war were on the other side of the iron, and we were standing in a low stone passage that smelled, faintly, impossibly, of bread. The widow began to weep then. Not before, not at the gate, not in the snow, not through any of it, but at the smell of bread she put her hand against the wall and wept without a sound, and her son took her other hand and said, "It's all right, Mama. We're inside. You said if we got inside it would be all right." And she nodded and could not speak, and Crane, who had clearly seen a great deal in his 60 years and learned to keep walking through all of it, said only, "This way. There's a fire. The little ones first, always the little ones first, and let us down." I learned the rest of it slowly, over that night and over the years after, in pieces, from Crane and from the cook, and once, much later, from the sergeant of the Wintergate himself. I will give it to you in order, though I did not learn it in order, because the shape of the thing only makes sense whole. The bell, the sentry had rung a bell. There was a cord, you see, that ran from a fixed iron ring inside the arch, set there for emergencies, for raising the watch if the gate were rushed, for calling the officer if there was trouble. A sentry was permitted to pull that cord. It was the one motion his orders allowed him that was not the rifle and not his own feet. One pull meant trouble at the gate. Two pulls, rung close together, meant officially nothing. It was not in the book. It had no meaning, the regulations recognized. But the men of the Wintergate had given it a meaning of their own, quietly, over that long terrible winter, the way men under pressure will invent the mercies their orders forget. Two bells meant, there is someone at this gate who needs the kitchen and cannot be turned away, and I cannot leave my post to help them, so I am asking you to come. It meant, I have seen something I am not permitted to act on, and I am trusting the rest of you to act on it for me. It was a sentry's way of breaking a rule he could not break, by handing it to a man who could. And the present arms, the salute he had given the widow, the formal honor reserved for the king's carriage and the colors of a regiment, that, the sergeant told me years later, had a purpose too, and it was the part that broke me when I finally understood it. He had not saluted her by mistake. He had saluted her on purpose, before witnesses, in the open, where the lane could see and where I could see. A man at that gate, the old sergeant said to me, could not give that woman a crust, but he could give her the one thing the cold could not take and the kitchen could not provide. He could make the whole street understand that she was not a beggar at our door. She came to us in mourning with 2 hungry children, and he met her with the honors of the house. Do you see it? He did not let her in as charity. He received her as someone worthy of the gate. There is a great difference. The first feeds the body and shames the soul. The second feeds the body and leaves the soul standing upright. My men knew that difference. We taught it to them on purpose. But I am ahead of myself again. Let me take you down to the kitchen, where the real story was, because the sentry's part, for all that it is the part the street remembered, was only the door. What waited on the other side of the door was the house keeping a promise that, by every rule of that hungry winter, it had no business keeping. The lower kitchen at Helsmore was a long vaulted room half below the ground, and after the lane it was a furnace. I remember the heat hit me like a hand. There was a great iron range along one wall with 3 fires going under it, and the smell I had caught in the passage was full and rich now. Not the smell of a feast, you understand. There were no feasts that winter, not even behind palace walls, but the honest smell of barley boiling and onions softening and dark bread under a cloth, which to 3 people who had not eaten in 2 days was the smell of heaven itself. The cook was a wide woman named Mistress Dunnell, with forearms like a smith's and a face that had decided, somewhere long ago, that it would do its grieving privately and present the world a working surface. She took one look at the children and did not ask a single question. She did not ask the widow's name or her parish or her husband's regiment, or why she had come or whether she was deserving. I have come to believe that this, not asking, was itself a kind of mercy that the men at the gate and the women in the kitchen had agreed upon between them, because to ask a starving woman to prove she deserves to eat is to make her pay for the food and the only coin she has left, which is her pride. "Sit them by the fire," Mistress Dunnell said. "Not too close, they'll come over faint. Crane the small chairs." And to the widow, in a voice that brooked no argument and offered no pity, "You'll have a bowl in front of you before you've got your coat off, so don't waste breath thanking me. There's no time for it and I don't care for it." She fed the children first. The little ones first, always the little ones first. I had heard Crane say it in the passage, and now I saw it was not a phrase but a law of that kitchen. 2 bowls of barley broth, not full, only half, small at first, the cook murmured to no one. "Small at first or it'll come straight back up, and that's good food on the floor and a frightened child besides. Set in front of the boy and the girl with a heel of the dark bread each. And here is the thing I want you to mark, because it is small and it is everything." She did not stand over them and watch them eat. She gave them the food and then turned her broad back and went to the range and busied herself with nothing at all, banging a pot, stirring a thing that did not need stirring, so that 2 hungry children could eat without the shame of being watched eating. The boy noticed. I saw him notice. He had been braced to be looked at, the way the poor are always looked at when they take charity, and instead he was simply, for a few minutes, a boy with a bowl by a fire, and he ate like one. The widow would not touch her own bowl. She sat with it in front of her, her thin hands around the warm crockery for the heat of it, watching her children eat, and when Mistress Dunnell told her sharply to eat, she said, "When they've had enough." "There may not be." "There's enough," said the cook, and it was the first lie I heard told in that kitchen, and it was a holy one, because there was not enough. There was never enough that winter, not anywhere, not for anyone, and the bowl in front of that widow and the broth in those children's stomachs had come out of somewhere, and I was about to learn out of where. The door at the far end of the kitchen opened, and the warmth of the room seemed to draw back from it, and a man came in. He was an officer. I knew it before I saw the marks of his rank, because of the way Crane straightened, and Mistress Dunnell's stirring went still for half a second before resuming. He was a man of perhaps 50, lean and gray and immaculate even down here in the steam, and he carried the particular weariness of a man who has spent 3 winters saying no to people he would rather say yes to. This, I would learn, was Major Halloran, the officer of the Wintergate Watch, the very man whose authority hung over the sentry in the arch, the man who could have had him off the wall and into the cells for what he had just done. He looked at the children by the fire. He looked at the widow with the untouched bowl. He looked at the steam and the bread under its cloth, and then he looked at the great ledger that lay open on the deal table by the door, and I understood, with a cold drop in my stomach, that the ledger was the rationing book, the accounting of every ounce that came into that house and every ounce that went out, and that the broth in those children's stomachs was written in it now, or was about to have to be. "Sergeant signaled the gate," the major said. "It was not a question. 2 bells." "Yes, sir," said Crane. "Mistress Dunnell has fed them from the watch ration." "Yes, sir," said Crane, and there was a flatness in his voice that I did not understand until later. The watch ration. The food in those bowls had not come from some endless palace larder. It had come out of the day's allotment for the men of the gate, for the sentries standing 12-hour shifts in killing cold, who needed every ounce of it and more, and who had, it seemed, an arrangement of their own. The sentry in the arch would go hungry tonight. So would Crane and Mistress Dunnell and the off-watch men in the guardroom. They had been doing this all winter, I realized, quietly, against the book, sentry by sentry and bell by bell, feeding the broken people who came to the small gate out of their own short rations, and saying nothing about it to anyone. The major stood very still and looked at the ledger. I want to be honest about what I felt in that moment, because if I tell you I felt only admiration, I will be lying again, and I have told enough lies for one story. I felt fear, real fear of the kind that grips you when you watch a kind thing about to be punished. I thought, he is going to write it down. He is going to enter it in the book, and the book will say the watch is overissued, and there will be an accounting, and the man in the arch and this gray cook and this scalded old steward will answer for 2 bowls of barley broth, and the children will be the last children ever fed at the Wintergate, because the house will close the door that the sentry's bell opened, and it will close it forever. The major picked up the pen. The widow saw it too. She got to her feet swaying, gripping the table, and she said, "Sir, if a wrong has been done here, it is mine. I came to your gate. I asked, these good people only, please. Whatever the rule is, I will stand for breaking it. Not them. Not him at the gate. Me." And she stood there, half dead on her feet, offering to take the punishment for the men who had saved her children's lives, and I thought my heart would crack straight across. The major looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at the boy by the fire, who had stopped eating and risen too, putting himself between the officer and his mother with his small chin up, ready to be a soldier again if soldiering was what the moment required of a boy of 7. And the major did the thing I have carried with me for 40 years. He wrote in the book. He bent over the open ledger and he wrote, in a careful clerk's hand, and the scratch of the pen was the only sound in that whole hot room. The widow watched the pen as though it were writing a sentence over her, and perhaps it was, though not the sentence any of us feared. Then he turned the ledger around on the table so that we could all see it, and he read aloud what he had written, in the level voice of a man entering a fact into a permanent record. "This day at the Wintergate," he read, "2 children and their mother, the family of a soldier of the house fallen in the king's service, received from the watch their proper relief, issued by my order, charged to my account." He set the pen down. "Now it is mine," he said quietly to the room, to Crane and the cook and the swaying widow and the boy with his chin up. "Not the sergeant's, not the man at the gate, not yours, madam, mine. I am the officer of this watch. Nothing happens at this gate but that I have ordered it, and I have ordered this. There is no rule broken here. There is only relief properly issued to the family of a man this house sent out to die." He looked at the widow then, and for the first time something moved in the lean gray face. "Your husband's regiment, madam, tell me." She told him. I will not give the name, because it was a real grief and it is hers, but I will tell you that when she said it, the major closed his eyes for the length of one breath, and when he opened them he said, "I knew that regiment. They held the Carron crossing when there was no earthly reason left to hold it. They bought us the winter we are now starving through. We are alive to be hungry because men like your husband chose not to run." He drew himself up. "This house does not feed beggars at its gate, madam. You are right to have said you would not be one. This house pays its debts, and it owes your children more than barley broth, though barley broth is what there is tonight, and you will take it, and there is no shame in it because it is owed. I have thought a great deal in the years since about the difference between charity and a debt paid. Charity puts the giver above the one who receives, and a proud soul will starve rather than be put below. But a debt paid puts them level, the one who owes and the one who is owed, settling a true account between equals." The men of the Wintergate had understood this in their bones, and they had built their whole quiet mercy around it. The sentry's salute, the cook who would not watch the children eat, the major who took the entry into his own account so that no one need ever feel they had stolen. Every one of them in his own way was saying the same thing to that broken family. "You do not owe us. We owe you. Sit down and let us pay." The widow sat down. She ate. I watched a starving woman eat barley broth as though it were a sacrament, and I watched her shoulders come down from around her ears for the first time, and I watched the gray leave her face by degrees as the warmth got into her, and I thought, I will remember this for the rest of my life, and I have. The children fell asleep by the fire. The little girl first, slumping sideways against her brother. And then the boy, who fought it the way a sentry fights it, who had clearly appointed himself the watch over his family and did not want to abandon the post. But a warm room and a full stomach are stronger than any 7-year-old's will. And at last his head went down, and Mistress Dunnell covered them both with a horse blanket warmed at the range, and stood looking down at them for a moment with her working face on. And then went back to the range and was very busy with nothing again, and her broad back was shaking, just slightly, and no one said anything about it. Major Halloran sat down across from the widow at the deal table. And here is where I learned the deepest part of it, the part beneath the part, the reason the Wintergate men did what they did and bore the cost of it without a word. You will want to know, the major said, why a sentry forbidden to move would risk the cells for you. I will tell you because you should know it and because he will never tell you himself. He folded his hands on the table. 3 winters ago there was a woman at this gate with a child on a night colder than this one. The man on the arch that night was forbidden to move, exactly as he is forbidden now. He did not ring the bell. He did not know there was a bell to ring. We had not invented it yet. He stood his post correctly, by the book perfectly. And the woman and the child went away into the snow because there was no door for them. And in the morning they were found at the foot of the Carrowdyke wall, not 100 yards from a kitchen with 3 fires going. The room had gone very quiet. Even the fires seemed to listen. That sentry, the major went on, is now my sergeant of the Wintergate. He has stood this gate every winter since. He is the one who invented the 2-bell signal and taught it to every man who serves under him, and he is the one who arranged with Mistress Dunnell that the watch ration would always be a little larger than the watch needs, so that there would be something to give when the bell rang, that no ledger had to account for as taken from a hungry man's mouth, because it had never been entered as his in the first place. The major looked at the widow. He has spent 3 years building a door where there was no door. The man in the arch tonight rang the bell your sergeant gave him. Everything that happened to you at our gate tonight, madam, happened because one man could not save a woman and a child once, and decided he would never again be a man who couldn't. The widow did not weep. I think she had no tears left to spend. But she looked toward the passage that led back up to the gate, toward the man standing in the snow who had given her children the honors of the house and could not even know whether his bell had been answered, and she said, very low, "He cannot leave his post." "No," said the major, "he cannot." "Then how does he know," she said, "whether it worked, whether we got in, whether the children ate?" The major was quiet for a moment. "He doesn't," he said. "That is the hardest part of the post, and few people understand it. He rings the bell and then he stands his ground, and he never learns whether the people he tried to save lived or died. He trusts the rest of us to finish what he cannot. He gives the mercy away into the dark and stands at attention while other hands carry it. There is no harder thing a disciplined man can do than to start a kindness he is forbidden to finish, and trust it to strangers, and never look down to see how it lands. I have thought about that too all my life. We praise the men who finish things. We hang medals on the ones who are there at the end, when the deed is done and the rescue complete. But there at the cold gate was a man who did the beginning of a good thing and would never see its end, who would stand his 12 hours and march off into the dark not knowing, and come back the next night not knowing, and stand again. The discipline that forbade him to move was the same discipline that let him hold the not knowing. It was all one thing. The stillness and the mercy were not at war in him. They were the same muscle. It was Crane in the end who could not bear it. The old steward had been standing by the passage all this while, and at the widow's question something in him gave way. "Begging your pardon, sir," he said to the major, "but there's no rule says the watch can't be brought a hot drink on a night like this. There's no rule in any book. I've carried hot drink to the arch on cold nights for 30 years and no officer ever stopped me." He was already reaching for a tin cup. "And if a man happened to see, while he was drinking it, that there was a horse blanket on 2 warm children by a fire, well, a man can see what's in front of him without turning his head, sir. That much they're allowed." The major looked at the old man for a long moment. Then, for the first time that night, he almost smiled. "Carry on, Mr. Crane," he said. "Take the watch's drink. It's a cold night." I went with Crane. I asked to, and he let me, and I think he knew why. We climbed the ice steps, and Crane worked the wicket, and the cold came at us like a living thing. And there in the arch stood the sentry exactly as I had left him an hour before, frost on his shoulders, cap whitened, rifle grounded, eyes on the empty middle distance, a man made of winter. He had not moved. For all he knew, the widow had been turned away. For all he knew, his bell had gone unheard, and 3 more people were dying in the snow within sight of his post, and there was nothing in his bearing, nothing at all, to say what that not knowing cost him. Crane held up the tin cup. "Your drink, Sergeant's compliments," he said loudly, formally, for the benefit of any window that might be listening, and then lower, conversational, as he tipped the warm cup so the man could drink without lowering his rifle. "The little ones are asleep by my fire, lad, fed and warm. The mother, too. The major's entered it as a debt of the house, all proper, charged to his own account. There'll be no trouble for any of us, not for you, not for me, not for her." "You did right, you did exactly right. They're safe." I was watching the sentry's face. "I will tell you what I saw, and then I will tell you why it is the truest thing I know about courage." Nothing moved. Not the eyes, not the mouth, not the line of the jaw. He took 2 swallows of the warm drink, and he kept his eyes on the middle distance, and he did not look toward the kitchen, did not ask a question, did not let one flicker of the great thing inside him reach his face. He held it, the way he held everything. The relief of a man who learns the people he tried to save are alive. And there is no greater relief on this earth. I have felt it since, and I know. And he held it behind that carved face the way he held the cold and the hours and the not knowing, because that was the post, and the post was the whole of him. But as Crane stepped back and shouldered the wicket, the sentry spoke, quietly, barely a breath, against every order. 2 words meant for no window, meant only for the old man and for me and for the dark. "Thank you," he said. "Not for the drink. We both knew it was not for the drink." Then he was a statue again, and we went down out of the cold, and the wicket shut, and the iron winter went on howling against the iron as if nothing had happened there at all. As if a door had not been built in the dark by a man who could not leave his post. As if the whole frozen world had not, for 1 hour at one small gate, been made to remember that the family of a man who chose not to run does not stand outside in the snow. They stayed the night. The major arranged it, a corner of the warm storeroom, more blankets, the children sleeping the deep sleep of the safe. In the morning, Mistress Dunnell filled a sack with what could be spared, which was little, but it was given the way everything at that gate was given, as a debt and not a dole. And the major, before they left, made a quiet entry into another book, the relief roll of the house, where the families of the fallen were meant to be recorded, and had, in the chaos of that winter, been forgotten, so that the widow and her children would have their proper allotment every week thereafter, by right, by name, without ever again having to stand at a gate and ask. "You came to the wrong gate, madam," the major told her, "if you came to beg. There is no begging here. But you came to exactly the right gate if you came to be reminded what you are owed. Come back when the sack is empty. Come to the small gate. Ring at the wicket. You are on the roll now. You will always be answered." I walked the widow and her children back through the snow that morning to the rooms she kept on the Carrodike. The boy walked beside me the whole way with the soldier's straightness back in his small shoulders, and at the corner where the lane turned away from the wall he stopped and looked back once at the far arch where you could just make out a gray figure standing his post in the white light. He brought his hand up to his brow again, the same clumsy, serious salute, holding it until his arm shook. The sentry was too far now to see it. It did not matter. The boy was not saluting to be seen. He was saluting because some things are owed, and he had learned where he learned it, and he meant to be the kind of man who pays. That boy grew up. I knew him all his life. I will not tell you all of what he became, because it is his and not mine to give away, but I will tell you that he served, and that he served at a gate, and that on cold nights he was known to keep the watch ration a little larger than the watch required, for no reason anyone could find in any book. I am an old man now, and most of what I have seen has gone gray and run together in the way of a long life. But that gate stays. The widow who would not break, the cook's shaking back, the major's pen taking it onto his own account, the old man with the tin cup. And the sentry, most of all the sentry who could not move and could not speak and could not leave and could not even look down, and who found, inside all those cannots, the one thing he could do, and did it, and asked nothing, and never knew if it worked, and stood there in the killing cold giving the honors of his house to a starving stranger as though she were a queen. People think discipline is a wall you build to keep the world out. I thought so too that night before I learned better. But I watched a man hold himself perfectly still in the snow so that he could move heaven and earth for a woman and 2 children he was forbidden to so much as glance at, and I understood at last what the discipline was for. It was not to keep him from feeling. It was to make sure that, when everything in him wanted to break, the part of him that could actually help would still be standing. He stood, they were fed, they were given back their dignity and their place and their name, and the door he could not walk through, he built and left standing open behind him in the dark for every cold soul who would ever come after. That is the whole of it. That is what I saw at the winter gate, and I have spent the rest of my life trying to be worthy of having been there.